the trailer of our film, The Brown Heart.
In the middle of a beautiful hike at 8,000 feet above the sea level in Uttarakhand, I had chest pain. For a minute, I thought I may not make it. जिंदगी में पहली बार गुजरने का डर लगा.
For many of us from the Indian subcontinent, time may be running out fast. A human enemy, the heart attack.
Heart attack. Heart attack.
There is a rise in heart attacks among young people.
This is an epidemic.
Yeah, we're talking about people of South Asian descent.
Our real journey took us to 3 different continents, specifically to India, United Kingdom, and the United States.
70% of deaths from heart attacks occurred in people between ages 30 and 60.
2.5 लाख लोग हर साल ST elevation MI से हिंदुस्तान में मर रहे हैं.
So both of us set out to uncover what is behind the staggering loss of life.
उस टाइम इतना पेन हुआ था कि ना तो कुछ बोल पा रहा था मैं.
The common thread is just how frequent heart attacks are. We spoke to some of the best heart experts in the world.
When they talk, people listen.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, मोटापा जैसे हमारे modern आभूषण बनते हैं.
Heart disease and its risk as a whole in women seems to be very, very under-recognized.
Why is it happening?
Is it our genes?
You know you shouldn't be smoking.
80% diet, 20% everything else.
Some have placed stress at the top of the list of the causes of heart attack.
Habits are created by a loop, right? Cue, craving, action, and reward.
So I have lost between 14 to 15 pounds.
Life is beautiful. Let's take care of ourselves better.
तो सवाल ये है कि क्या ये हमारी किस्मत है? और अगर किस्मत है, तो क्या हम किस्मत बदल सकते हैं?
Next slide. So that really starts the journey of the brown heart. I'm Renu Joshi, and the whole story of brown heart really started by my own chest pain. In the middle of the hike, as you will see in the documentary, I had chest pain and I was diagnosed with heart disease. And when I started doing research, we found out that South Asians have been getting heart disease since 1960s, very early. So it has been close to 70 years. But as a doctor, a well-astute doctor, I did not know many facts about South Asians. And we thought if as a doctor we don't know about it, how is the public supposed to know about it? So we went and did a lot of research and started the journey of the brown heart. And Nirmal is going to share his story.
And then right around that time, what was happening was I was just getting towards the tail end of a very, very busy career in medicine. And we felt it was time to be able to give back to our community and start charitable processes. So we started a foundation called the Joshi Health Foundation, and essentially with 2 goals in mind. One was to be able to deliver free care to our own people in our own community. And the other was to be able to educate people. And when we talked about this educational piece, we felt that up until now, we had been doing 100, 200 people like today's audience, very important to us. But we felt we needed to scale this up to go to millions of people so that we were able to change and essentially save human life. This entire project, The Brown Heart, was funded entirely by philanthropic dollars, donations essentially from people right here in our community. And that is what led to the start of the Brown Heart, where we traveled essentially across the globe, across the United States, across India, and across the United Kingdom to essentially interview some of the best heart experts in the world, as well as human stories, and also some key celebrities to be able to get attention to this very, very important topic.
And this is the most important part, that this is the only docudrama you will see which has a complete medical backup and evidence. So everything is backed up by medical evidence and scientific evidence. And our today's goal is over the next 40 or 45 minutes, just to give a bird's eye view and then, encourage you to see the documentary and make some changes. So heart disease in Indians, just to give you an overlook, often 2 to 3 times more common than any other folks across the world. It is much more severe. It is earlier. So we get heart disease 5 to 10 years earlier than our usual counterparts of white Caucasians. And it is also widespread. What that means is when we get heart disease, we don't get in one vessel. We get in all three arteries. So thereby, many times, even stenting is very difficult.
So this is kind of what we are seeing on the ground as practicing physicians, right? What we are seeing is this picture that you see on the right hand side of young individuals coming into the emergency room, coming into ICUs with acute and very early heart attacks. So one of our first interviewees, Dr. Devi Shetty from Bangalore, had this to say about this epidemic.
In my practice, it is not the young son bringing his old father for a bypass grafting. It is the old father bringing his young son for a bypass grafting.
So the other thing we are noticing now is heart disease in women. It is a myth that heart disease is a men's disease and it doesn't happen in women. And it was true that heart disease was pushed to after menopause if you are good and if you have good health. But nowadays, the risks are so many more that younger women, the gap is now narrowing because younger women are becoming diabetic, they have obesity, they have difficult lifestyles, and they're smoking. So all of that is actually causing the heart attack to happen in the premenopausal woman before the menopause. The other problem with women, the symptoms can be very atypical, which means that we don't present with just regular chest pain. Yes, it still happens, but there are many other symptoms like anxiety or something is happening to me. And therefore, they're misunderstood as anxiety and breathlessness, and they're not taken to the hospital until it is very late.
So why are we so passionate about this topic? One perhaps most important reason, other than the fact that it's occurring in the young, is that literature seems to back up the fact that upwards of 80% of this is modifiable and indeed preventable. And this applies, by the way, to most chronic diseases, including diabetes, lung disease, and stroke. And on top of that list is heart disease.
And again, why are we so passionate about it? So think about it. When you're trying to save money in your savings account at age 65, when do you start to save? You have to start saving between the age of 25 to 30. So as the blue line can say, that you will see a much better investment at age 65 rather than when you start saving at 45, 50, and 55. So when you invest in your money, why don't you invest in your life and health? And this health means heart, muscle, bone, brain, lungs. You have to start investing way back at age 25 and 30. So all the senior members in this community who are listening, this is for your children. This is for your grandchildren. So you need to start saving at age 25 when it comes to heart disease.
But here's the barrier. When our kids, our grandkids, or in some instances, if you are young, you are at this age, this is what people think at this age.
Anybody of this age group, myself included, it's very hard to think about what's going to happen 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now.
So that is the barrier, right? So today's journey will talk a little bit about the why, then tell me what can I do about it, and finally, the most important, how do I do about it?
So the first part on the why is heart disease happening? So if you talk to people, and we did this to literally tens and, even up to 100 people on the ground. When you ask people often say, and this is a fairly typical Desi mindset. When you ask people, they say, "Ye tumhari kismat mein hai." This is our genetics and somehow. Now, why is that a problem? The reason that's a problem is what that means is that I cannot do anything about it. And this is one of our experts who this is what they had to say about that.
Fate is a very important factor in our life.
There was some form of acceptance. So this word kismat was branded around.
I think that's a lazy approach and it's fatalistic. It leads to fatalism.
So while kismat is important, we actually went to the world's expert in Boston to talk about. And these two young group of people, of physicians, they have actually now created a polygenic risk score. What that means is they have taken a lot of mutations of genes together, and there's not one small mutation which changes the gene, but if you take thousands of mutations together, you can come up with this risk score. And the good part is that anybody can get this risk score done now. They're available both in India and here. So you can find out what your genetics is all about. And the key thing is what they found, if you are in the top high risk at the genetic risk score, if your number is in the top 10th percentile, you have triple the risk of heart disease. So yes, even though genetics is 20%, that risk may help you. But in the same study, these guys are also showing, which is even more important, that if you have the highest genetic risk, as you can see on the right side of the slide, if you have the highest genetic risk, by living a good lifestyle, you can actually change that risk to low genetic risk. So while genetic matters, you can change your genetics with a good lifestyle, and we'll focus on that.
So this is where the majority of the conversation will happen today, the true 80% that can be changed or modified. And we will go through these one by one. So the first one is blood pressure. The normal blood pressure is about 120/80. And here's what's going on in the context of India and Indians across the globe when it comes to blood pressure.
25% of hypertensives in the rural and about up to 50% of adults in the urban areas are hypertensives.
High blood pressure is a silent killer. It kills the heart, it kills the kidneys, it kills the brain.
So the diabetes is the next important monster, very close to my heart since I'm a diabetologist. And we talk a lot more about this in the documentary. Diabetes, the normal numbers are less than 100 sugar in the morning is normal. 100 to 125 is pre-diabetes, and more than 125 is diabetes. So once again, while our counterpart, white Americans, have 11% diabetes, South Asians, both in India and here, have 15 to 20% of South Asians have diabetes. And in India, it is rising like this. So by the 2050 timeframe, we'll be #1 capital of diabetes in the world. And this is what somebody has to say who is a cardiologist.
For me, diabetes equals heart disease. We call it the equivalent.
The next important risk factor is cholesterol, and we'll devote a lot of attention to this because we believe this is also preventable. For right now, I just want you to remember that the bad cholesterol, which most of you know, is called LDL, right? So, and the other type of cholesterol, which is a subtype of LDL, which you may or may not have heard of as much, is called LP(a). For right now, just familiarize yourself with these names. And also familiarize yourself with 3 numbers. On the LDL side, for right now, just remember 100, 70, and 55. And we will come to all these 3 numbers in a few slides from now.
So who do we worry about the most? An Indian patient who is between 35 to 40 years of age or even younger, has a borderline high LDL above 100, has a borderline low HDL, which is a genetic, we cannot change that, had a little bit of pot belly, which we're going to talk in a second, and you go to the doctor and the doctor says everything is okay, there's nothing wrong. This is the guy who is going to have a highest chance of having a heart attack over the next 5 to 10 years.
Just a quick housekeeping note. It looks like a couple of you are not muted. So can you take a quick look? And if you're not muted, just go ahead and mute yourself. Thank you. So we'll keep moving ahead. Now, what Renu talked about was this patient who we worry about the most. So the root cause, when you look at all of the things we're talking about, whether it's diabetes, blood pressure, hypertension, all of these, there is a common villain that we call visceral fat. Visceral fat in simple plain English means fat that we hide deep inside our bodies. In the case of Indians, the most common area where we hide it is in the belly. So this is like the little taunt that people have, right? So above the waist, they're okay. Below the waist, or above the waist, I'm sorry, they put this on at the, in their belly. So Indians are what we call, typically are overweight by what we call apple-shaped obesity, which means they put on weight above the waistline. While our Western counterparts are what are called pear-shaped obesity, which is most of their fat is in the area of their butt, which is below the belt. Turns out that fat that is above the belt, deep inside the belly, is what is a true reflection of visceral fat, and that's bad for you from a metabolic standpoint and is the origin of many of the things that we talked about. This is also quite often referred to as the thin fat Indian, meaning in the chest area we look thin, but below that we are fat. And there is another word which is very commonly used called mota. Mota doesn't mean what you and I know as mota, but it is metabolically obese, thin Asian. Okay, and we'll come back more to this. Two take-home messages from this slide. One is that when we calculate the body mass index, right, meaning what your weight should be related to your height, normally in everyone else, in our Western counterparts, the cutoff of being normal versus abnormal is 25. But in South Asians, because of all that I just talked about, that cutoff is 23. And secondly, a much more reflective measure of cardiometabolic risk is the waist circumference. And we will get more into that a little later. So waist circumference is one thing that you should check.
So where is this visceral fat coming from? Why are you moving and putting the fat in our belly all the time? And it looks like only two things. And I know all of us know it. One is diet, and the second is inactivity. We eat way too much and we don't burn it out. It's as simple as it is. So let's talk a little bit about diet, right? I cannot tell you we have a group, and I think 90% of our questions come on this. Our Indian diets are quadruple threat, as we call it. Number one, we eat way too many carbs, simple carbs. That means the juices. I mean, we have a fascination with juices. Simple carbs, that causes quick sugar spike and builds visceral fat directly. Our sugar, our directly sugar in the tea, mithai, polished white rice, which again, favorite. So all of these are very simple carbs. The higher the spike of the sugar, the more the inflammation into your heart. Second most important diet part is high saturated fat. So saturated fats are something which are really solid on the room temperature and not liquid, and these are your oil, right? And they provide much more higher calories, which again leads to directly formation of visceral fat. The more fat we become, the more visceral fat we have. An example of that, deep fry. You know, in this day and age still, I would say 60% of our snacks are deep fried. Butter, use of ghee, mithai, full of this, paneer, biryani, I mean, you name it. All of these high fat content are poorly associated with heart issues. The third thing is even more important, a high trans fat. So this is a fat that is built when you keep refrying. So if you're using the same oil over and over and over again. So let's say if you go on a street and you buy a jalebi from a street vendor, he's refrying the oil. So this trans fat is produced, and these are not only high calories, but they cause direct injury to the heart. And so much so that FDA has banned these trans fat in the country since 2018. And WHO recommends only less than 1% of these. A jalebi on a street, which you buy from outside, not frying at home, but jalebi which you get from outside, has 18% trans fat, just one jalebi. So just think about it. Samosas, mithai, any processed food. So think about it before you put them in your mouth. And the fourth important part of our diet is we have low protein. No matter what we try, our protein intake is very low, especially like I am, if we are vegetarians, because we don't eat enough protein. And protein has indirect contribution to visceral fat. Why? Because it has lower muscle mass. When you don't have muscle, you don't utilize glucose. The less the muscle, the less utilization of glucose, the more sugar, more diabetes, and more heart attack.
The other part, like Renu said earlier, is Indians have some of the lowest exercise rates in the world. And this is Dr. V. Mohan from Chennai when I interviewed him for the documentary.
People to go for a walk, they'll say either a truck will hit me, or the smoke will kill me, or a dog will bite me and I may get rabies, you know. Therefore, I don't want to go for a walk. So all three are true.
You know, so those are excuses from those of us who are in India still. The other part that is very important is something that happens particularly more so this time of the year in Delhi and places around there, which is air pollution. The important part I want to mention here, almost everyone in this room, in this virtual room, probably knows that air pollution causes lung problems, right? But it's very critical to know that the most common cause of death from air pollution is actually heart disease and strokes, 34 plus 20%. So that's very important.
And then what else? What other causes for heart disease? So this is again a very important factor both here as well as across the globe. The psychosocial stress. So there is a lot of data on this, and this is one study which I wanted to talk to you about. A guy from Delhi has actually done research where he looked at the people who had heart attack between the age of 25 to 35. Young people. They had no other risk factor, no genetics, no cholesterol, no blood pressure, no diabetes. And when he asked them the question as to how much stress do you have, what he found was almost 80% of them or more had moderate or severe psychosocial stress. And he also did another research where he actually looked at the chromosomes, a telomere. Again, we will not go into detail, but we talk about it in the documentary. He measured the telomere, which tells you about how much is your usual age versus biologic age. So most of these people who were 25 to 35, their telomere had shortened to the point that their biologic age was close to 65 to 70 years. So stress is a major contributor for heart disease. And along with stress is sleep, because they're both together, right? So if you're stressed out, you will not sleep well. And again, data shows again and again that if you sleep less than 7 hours a day, you have a very severely increased risk of heart disease.
Other than that, good old smoking and alcohol. I say that a little tongue in cheek, but smoking, all of you know. I want to spend a couple of seconds on alcohol, right? Historically, we have been told, particularly in the United States, there has been that, one glass of wine is okay, right? There is more and more data over the course of the past 2 years specifically showing that no amount of alcohol is safe. Even small amounts of alcohol can lead to heart muscle weakening and arrhythmias, and alcohol in general can contribute to heart attacks.
So again, we have given you the whole scenario of why heart attacks are happening in 5 minutes. Before we talk, tell me what I do, I just wanted to talk a little bit about COVID, because I think we took that slide away. People think, oh, COVID has done all of this. There is no doubt that COVID increased the coagulability, like the blood vessels started clot more when you had COVID, and that caused increased heart attack risk. And there were studies on that, both here and in India. But that heart disease mortality has already come down. But South Asians are still dying of heart disease. And also, we started having this in 1970s and not in 2020. So COVID has come and gone, but heart disease has not changed. So we cannot attribute that all of this is happening to COVID. So now let's focus on, tell me what can I do about it? So we came up with an acronym in our film called as Swadesh, our own country, and it has 6 things, and we'll talk about each one of them, especially focusing on few more than the others. So stop smoking, watch your weight, assess your risk, diet, exercise, sleep, and stress.
So let's start with what I believe is a very critical starting point of a healthy journey to prevent heart disease, which is to be able to assess your risk, meaning understanding my own body. And I think that's a message we repeatedly pass on to anyone that we talk about this topic. And to that end, we believe that the human body is more complex, arguably, than an aircraft. So what does an aircraft need? The cockpit has all these multiple dials, right? Yet as a human being, we just kind of move along in life without knowing what's inside our body. So we believe that there should be a similar sort of a cockpit, what we are calling the heart health cockpit. And I'll walk you through them. The first one we talked about is blood pressure. That should be, you should know your blood pressure. And the ideal blood pressure for those who don't have it or don't have diabetes is 120/80.
The blood sugar, as I told you, should be less than 100.
Body mass index, a quick calculation, we've already told you, should be less than 23 in South Asians.
And the waist circumference, we said we'll come to that. Any woman who has a waist circumference of more than 80 centimeter, or in male, if you are more than 90 centimeter, that is a beginning of telling you a truth that you may be an extra risk for heart disease. And that is something very simple. You can literally finish off the lecture and measure it today.
The next one is all of these, what I call the cholesterol panels, right? You should, if you forget everything else today, other than the waist circumference perhaps, remember that you should know one number when it comes to cholesterol, and that number is LDL, which is the bad cholesterol. We will come back to these numbers in just a minute, but in regular people who do not have diabetes, every single South Asian, their LDL should be less than 100. For right now, just remember that. And if you are a diabetic, then that number should be less than 70. And if you already have heart disease, that number should be not only less than 70, but perhaps closer to 50. Okay. Now, there are two other specific numbers, which we will get to on the next slide, which are called lipoprotein A and a specific test called the CAC score.
So LP little a is another part of the LDL, which is much more atherogenic, which means it has a higher risk of causing heart disease. Unfortunately, 25% of Indians have a high LP little a, and it is genetic. And your normal doctor would not check that unless you ask for it, because it's making you more prone to heart disease. If you have a high LP little a, only one reading is enough. So you don't need to keep repeating it, because we don't even have any drugs to really improve LP little a. What that tells you, if your LP little a is high, which is above 75 generally, then you need to keep that LDL even lower, close to 50 or 70, because it doubles or triples or quadruples the risk of heart disease. So that's very important. So if you have not gotten an LP little a checked, we believe that all South Asians should get LP little a at least one time in life. The second thing is CAC score. So this is called the coronary artery calcium, which means that it is measuring the calcium inside your heart arteries. It is a CAT scan, but it's a 5-minute CAT scan. And it does not give you any dye. So it's a very simple test. It is still not covered by insurance. So you pay $99 to get it done. So it's not that expensive. Many people can afford it. And when you go, you can actually ask your doctor to write for it, and they'll do it. And again, it is usually once is enough. But if you're young and you don't have a CAC score, which is a 0, then you can get it done every 5 to 7 years. The high result, if you have any CAC score, if you're young and if you have any CAC score above 10, that means you're starting to build a plaque. And the reason it measures the calcium is you get the damage to the artery, and that damage then has calcium deposits on it. So it can measure earlier part of heart disease, which then motivates you to do some action and take something to keep your LDL low.
Now let's get to a topic that is sort of among Indian circles ends up being taboo sometimes, right? So this is starting cholesterol medication, because in Indians, one of our problems is we are super reluctant to start medications. We call it medication hesitancy. Some people are so resistant to start medications, they will do anything they can to stay natural and not start medication, even to the extent of that costing them their life. So here's the bottom line, and this is a quick summary, which I'm now repeating very purposefully. So if you do not have, if you do have heart disease or diabetes, you should keep your LDL definitively less than 70. All other South Asians should keep their LDL less than 100. Now, if you start natural methods, meaning diet, everything else that you want to do, and we tell people you can do any of that, but please, 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 if that's not working for 6 months or more, it's time to start a medication. For some people, we are finding that they are still super reluctant to start medication because they're healthy, they feel great, they don't want to start anything. But this is where the problem starts. So if you're in that category where you will die before starting medication, then our recommendation is this is a perfect example where you should know your LP little a and CAC score. And if any one of them is elevated, you definitively should consider starting a statin and lowering your LDL to what we call target.
So there is so much evidence, and people think we belong to the pharmacological industry and we take money from them. This is all philanthropy. We have no interest in taking money. We have never spoken for any drug companies. So there is at least thousands of paper on why statins are important. The data is wonderful that they save lives. Yes, there are some things. So you can get muscle aches. And there's a small increase in diabetes if you take a very high dose statin. And I will share my story here a little bit because I think that'll help you. So I had no risk factors in my life, no diabetes, no high blood pressure. I've always been thin, and I have exercised literally 150 to 200 minutes a week all my life, starting at age 25. So I have been a very healthy individual, and I'm a vegetarian, do not eat fat at all. So I was really surprised when I got heart disease. And only one thing changed with menopause, which I got early menopause. My LDL started to go up. And it reached from my LDL was 70, it went to 110, 120, 130. And my doctor was cautiously telling me, hey, I think, Renu, you should go on a statin. And I said, why should I? I'm doing very well. And by the time the LDL was 140, I already had heart disease. And it was too late for me. Now I take the maximum dose of statin, which I have no choice about. And I also take 5 other pills just to get myself not another heart attack, right? So I don't want you to get that. I want you to stop it much before and lead a much healthier life if you can. So let's talk a little bit about Indian diets. We talked about diet. What is the problem? How do we change? And obviously it's a full 1-hour topic. So what we have done is we have done a separate Indian diet seminar, and it's available. You can take a picture of this QR code, and we'll be sending all the slides to Chaya so she can send it to you, because as I said, we want more and more people to see it and read it and hear about it. But what we'll do is talk about the principles in the next 5 minutes.
So when you think about diet, we look at it simplistically in 2 buckets. How much are you eating and what type are you eating? So the first step, and as Renu said, we'll keep at a 30,000 foot level. So how much? How do you figure out if you're eating too much, too little? In very simple terms, there is a formula called the total daily energy expenditure. All you have to do is Google it. One of the first things that comes up, it'll take about 30 seconds to plug in your height and weight and the amount of exercise you do, and you'll be able to find out what your TDEE is. What that means is, let's say that number is 1800 calories. It'll be different for different people, right? It's very simply the amount of energy your body is expending based on the amount of exercise you do or don't do in the course of a day. So if it's 1800 and you eat more than 1800 calories, in very simplistic terms, although it depends on the type of calories as well, you're more likely to put on weight. On the other hand, if you eat less than 1800 calories, you're likely to lose weight, in simple terms, right? With that in mind, we request people to then not only check the TDEE, but then figure out how much they're eating in the course of the day. And you don't have to do this every single day of of your life, but if you do it for a week, you get a pretty good handle on what you're doing. And there are many, many food apps, and Renu and I are happy to also send you the amount of calories in every Indian item. We have a nice PDF that we're happy to kind of share with you. So if you are having 1 katori dal, how much calories, and so on and so forth. So you do that math, and then you figure out the TDEE. And if you want to lose weight, you want to go less than the total TDEE. The second thing is, what type of food are you eating? Simplistic terms right now, the only take-home message, these are percentages of protein, carbohydrates, and fat, but you will forget this by the time this lecture is done. So the one thing we do want you to remember is that 1 gram of protein and carbohydrate gets you 4 calories, but 1 gram of fat, very simplistically, will get you about twice as much, 9 calories. So before you get into a heated debate about whether ghee is good or bad, or canola oil is good or bad, or sunflower oil is good or bad, every single oil has the same amount of fat. Saturated fat, different story. We'll talk about that. But very simplistically, the more fats you eat, the more calories go in.
So this was, we were just in India talking about. The good part is that all the restaurants now showing calories, which doesn't even happen here. So I was very happy to see that. But in one of the restaurants, we went to eat dal. So you can see the plain dal has 333 calorie in one katori. But as soon as you do tadka dal, the calorie went up to 841. Unbelievable. So I actually called the chef and asked him what he was doing. And he said, I put 60 grams of butter when I do tadka. So just imagine. So what changes can you do? Again, a bird eye views. Number one, lower your simple sugar. If one thing you can avoid today and stop today is stop drinking sugary drinks like Coca-Cola, Fanta. You can have sweetener, but no regular sugary drinks and plain sugar. If you can avoid, you will lower your risk of diabetes by at least 20 to 25%. Increase your fiber. Anytime you add fiber to a meal like salads, and how many Indian restaurants serve salad, right? Zero. So we don't eat salads much. And salad we name as onion and onion and nibu. That's it. So fruits and salad, when you add to anything, it gives you fiber and it decreases the spike of the sugar. The second thing, anything you change from white to whole grain. So white polished rice to brown rice, red rice, grain rice, whatever you want to do, that is increasing your fiber and again, lowering your spikes of sugar. Nuts is a great source of fiber. Having 10 nuts in the morning is a great thing to start your day with. Not a bad thing. You will not increase your cholesterol unless you're eating, the 3 handful of nuts. Then lower your saturated fat. Very, very important. We talked about the saturated fat, and the example of that are butter, ghee, coconut oil, and some of the animal oils like lard, which we don't even use anymore. But in South Asians, the total calories, only less than 6% should come from saturated fat. In American population, they talk about less than 10%. But because South Asians are higher risk, less than 6%. And it is very, very important. So just do 1 tablespoon of ghee in a day will get you 10% of your calories, the full saturated fat in a day. Just think about it. Coconut oil, even less. Half a tablespoon of coconut oil will probably do that. So when you're taking oil, think about it because you're also eating other sources of saturated fat. So as long as you do things in moderation and make your regular cooking in olive oil and vegetable oils and others, and we have a full seminar on oils coming up soon, avoid deep frying food like we talked about. No deep fried or very, very few amounts of deep fried food. Increase your protein, lean meat, soya products, edamame, lentils, tofu, and a low-fat paneer. Not the regular paneer because it has a high fat, but if you go to low-fat paneer, you get a lot of protein. And the other principle, which one of the South Asian Heart Center we interviewed, they have a huge coaching program for improving heart attacks. And the big mantra is more greens than grains. So your plate should look like this. You should have half greens, which is vegetables and salads. 1/4 should be protein, which could be vegetable or non-vegetable. And 1/4 should be high quality grains like brown rice, etc. or roti.
Then there is this concept that is becoming coming more and more of age, which we call an Indian adaptation of the Mediterranean diet. So while Renu and I typically do not recommend extreme diets, too much fat, too much this, too much, just they come and go because they're very hard to sustain. They all work to reduce weight, but they're hard to sustain. But one diet that has stood the test of time is the Mediterranean diet. And more data is coming out of India from Indian publications, particularly from the All India Institute in Delhi, on the inflammatory elements of Indian food and those Indian foods that are anti-inflammatory, meaning they have more of a component of the Mediterranean diet. So I'll give you some examples of this. So examples of inflammatory food are in the red, things like white rice, maida, most mithai, refined sugar, and so on. But anti-inflammatory food, which form the basis of the Indian adaptation of Mediterranean diet, most Indian spices are actually anti-inflammatory. They're good for the heart. Green vegetables, grains like millets and brown rice have anti-inflammatory properties, and things like olive oil, fruits, and certain types of fish. So you get an idea. And if you need more information, let us know, and we'll be happy to share more information on the IAMD.
So just remember that heart disease is now considered to be an inflammatory disease. That's a new thing. Now let's talk a little bit about the exercise. And again, we'll just talk very briefly. There are three kinds of exercise. All three are important. One is aerobic exercise, where your heart rate has to go up because that is what will burn your calories and will help you lose weight. And these are cardiac aerobic exercise. You can play a sport or you can do any exercise where the heart rate goes up. The second form of exercise is muscle strengthening. Again, building up muscle. We talked about low muscle mass. So very important for females, but for anyone, especially after menopause, because they also prevent fractures and osteoporosis, but they also help improving sugar spikes. And the third thing is flexibility or yoga. Very good data on yoga with improving heart disease, improving stress. But if the yoga does not increase your heart rate, then you have not done the cardio component. So what we suggest is a combination of all of them to improve your heart health.
And not all need to be done in the same day. You can mix and match over time. So this is an important component. We strongly believe in the fact that aerobic exercise is a critical foundational element of an exercise program. So how do you know you're performing adequate aerobic exercise, which the recommendation from the American Heart Association is about, about 20 to 30 minutes a day. So the way to do this is very simple. You calculate what's called your maximum predicted heart rate. Very simply, 220 minus age. So if I'm 60, 220 minus 60 will be 160. That's my maximum predicted heart rate. And then there are zones of exercise. You need to be at a minimum at zone 2, which means 60 to 70% of maximum predicted. So in a 40-year-old male, zone 2 would be about 120. So if you haven't gotten to 120 in a 40-year-old person, you are not doing adequate aerobic exercise. A quick and practical way, if you don't want to do any of this, is that if you're walking with a partner and you can just have a clean, straight conversation, it is unlikely that you are in zone 2.
And then a little bit the meditation, 15 minutes of meditation has shown multiple times in the data that it actually improves heart attack risk. So 15 minutes every day, 5 days a week, whatever you can do, whichever form of meditation you can do, will be good for your heart. So this is the final topic now. How do I do it, right? And then we'll open the floor for questions. But this we think is the most important. So there's actually a full habit science as to how do you develop good habits, right? The first one is to start small. Starting small means you only take one thing. I'm going to make one small change in today. It has to be relatively easy, which I can do. It has to be measurable, so I can measure it tomorrow. And it has to have a short time endpoint, so I can see what happens in a month. So a very simple thing, maybe stopping that regular soda tomorrow morning and switch to either water or a sweetener soda if you can go to water. Or I'm just going to give up my 3 p.m. fried snack. Whatever, simple. Or I'm going to eat out only once a week as opposed to 4 times a week. Simple.
The second is that there is this concept of a habit loop. All habits are created by a loop that has a cue, craving, action, and a reward. Time doesn't permit me to go into the details of this today, but I'm only going to focus on one part of it. A cue is that when you, for example, if I see French fries and I just want to eat them right away because that's my cue, right? That's an example of a cue. So good habits can be formed by making a cue easier, while bad habits can be broken by making the cue harder. So as an example, one example is on the left lower corner of the slide is, this is our bedroom and that's my exercise clothing. That's right next to my bed, right? So as soon as I get up, I see my entire exercise stuff and I literally have to jump over it to go to the bathroom. So the first thing I see is that, and then I wear that and I go down to exercise. An example of the other direction, which is removing sugary drinks and soda from the fridge. So if you don't see it, there is no cue there and you're making the cue harder.
The other thing is motivation. I am not motivated enough, so motivation comes from many different things. But one small thing is that all or nothing. I'm coming back home at 8 o'clock. I have no time. I just can't get to it. I won't do it. All or something is a phenomena what we teach. If you don't have time for 30 minutes, do it for 10. I tell my older folks who cannot go out for a walk, I tell them just walk across the kitchen for 5 minutes to 10 minutes after each meal and you have your exercise. My mom, 87, I tell her that. Just walk across the kitchen for 10 minutes. And when you do that, you're already building a habit.
The third one is what's called temptation bundling, meaning bundling something that's good for you with something that's also fun. So, for example, while doing a treadmill exercise, being able to watch a television program that you enjoy. In my instance, it's an app called Blinkist where I can actually read a book that actually talks to me within about 20 minutes, right? So that's an example of something that you can do.
And I think this we believe is the most important. And in our documentary, we have data to support this. It was shown in the study that men do more exercise when they walk with a friend. So exercise increases. But for women, there was more exercise if they did it with a spouse. So if you did with a spouse, so which means buddy system, you're getting teamed up together. You have a team of people doing things together, and that really forms a good habit. And one of the biggest example of that is on the next slide. After the documentary was screened in many places in India in Geo Hotstar, and we have screened it here, we have a group now of WhatsApp group of 1,000 people, to the point we just had to start another group because we had full group in one. And this is a community. So anybody can post questions on it and we answer. They post what they did worked for them. Other people learn. So I think that's an example of a buddy system.
And again, we'll have these, the Brown Heart 2, which we just started a week ago. You're welcome to join that. And we post the same stuff in both the Brown Heart groups.
And then finally, substitution, this all of you know, going from 4% milk to 2% to 1%, going from sugar to sweetener, simple things make big changes.
Now, the last thing that I want to spend a minute on before we end is this concept. All that we talked about today is actually the bottom of the pyramid, right? Is good health. That's the starting point. So we talk about the fact is that the first step is to be alive, to have anything else, right? And all that we talked about helps in us being alive and leading a good healthy life. However, true enjoyment and joy from life comes from many more things beyond just being healthy, which is the basic requirement. And there is a very interesting concept by a positive psychologist of 3 types of life: a pleasant life, a good life, and a meaningful life. Pleasant life and good life are kind of what most of us have been able to do. Care for our children, make a good living, make enough of a salary to be able to make a good living. But most people believe that we as human beings crave for something bigger. And that's called a meaningful life, which is contributing to the greater good, being able to give back to your community, being able to give back to folks. And to that end, it is very, very critical. And we've been talking to a lot of executives of late of creating what's called a strategic plan.
So like Chaya is doing, this is a good community service for all of you. Like Aparna ji is doing, we are doing something meaningful. So what we talk about is we all create strategic plan for our workplace, right? For 5-year strategic plan. But have we created a strategic plan for our life? As to what is our life going to look like 10 years from now or 5 years from now. And for that, you have to create broad principles today. You have to write your goals. What is your goal for the next 5 years? But then convert it to short term. What's going to happen next year? So if my goal for 5 years, I want to live a healthy life with no stent or bypass. Okay, that's my goal. What convert to short term, then which means you do small goals to do tangible, which can be achievable. And most important thing, write one thing today which you are not going to do to achieve that goal.
So now this is an example of this. 5 years ago, we created a life purpose, and this is kind of our strategic plan. Give back to humanity and the world that has been enormously kind to me and my family. I will do this by sharing my wisdom, wealth, experience, inner happiness, and knowledge with no expectation of material direct return. And then my annual goals that Renu just talked about, converting this was number 1, save at least 100 South Asian lives. This has now become 1,000 and 10,000 South Asian lives. Stay healthy myself, because if I can't stay healthy, how can I help others? So in my case, it was keep ideal body weight and increase my muscle mass. My to-do list was educate free every single time, in person or in social media, improve my muscle mass, increase my protein intake, and increase my personal training, and meditate every day. And not to do list was to avoid creative distractions. I creatively write, I publish, I used to write a whole lot. I said something has to give, so I have to stop those temporarily to be able to do this.
And my simple thing is I have to stay healthy, not to have stent, and of course save South Asian lives, which we both are doing. And what my not to do is not taking any new stress producing activities. So just stay focused on one thing you're doing and continue to promote that and keep doing that.
So this is where what we have set out on this mission, and every single one of you can help with this. So the thought process was, the individual numbers are not important. The thought process was, if we reach 1 million connections by way of this film, the film gets in front of 1 million people. Jio Hotstar alone got the film in front of, there were about 650,000 views on Jio Hotstar. And now it's on YouTube everywhere. Our goal is to get to about 1 million by multiple methods. And the thought process is, if only 10% of people who watch it do something for themselves, and 10% of them do something meaningful, almost 1,000 lives would have been saved. And the key is to not do this with any personal gain in mind. So we will leave you with these last 2 thoughts.
टेम्पल तो हमें समझ में आता है ना, मंदिर है हमारा ये जो शरीर है, ये मंदिर है. अगर आप वहां जाकर मंदिर में दिया अगरबत्ती करके उन भगवान की पूजा करते हो, तो इस भगवान की पूजा क्यों नहीं करते?
Most basic thing that we take for granted is our health. Because if you are not fit, if you are not healthy, there's nothing else that matters in the world.
And now to the last minute or 2 of the film.
सफर यहां खत्म नहीं, शुरू होता है. सवाल ये है कि कल सवेरे वो कौन सी एक चीज है जो आप अपने में बदलेंगे. कई बार सोच चुके हैं उड़ान भरने की, क्या कल सवेरे पंख खोलेंगे?
So that's how the film ends. And here's
This is just a checklist for tomorrow. If you have not done it, watch the Brown Heart film, check your waist circumference, do a BMI, calculate your maximum predicted heart rate, TDEE, get your blood sugar, blood pressure, LDL, LP(a), and ApoB checked, get a CAC score if you have not done it, and make 1 or 2 small measurable changes which you can do.
And that should have a clear yes/no answer at the end of 30 to 60 days. So these are all will be part of the PDF. I would rather open it up for questions right now. Each one of these slides is part of the PDF. And I think we can skip these for right now. And then let's just stop sharing and we will open it up for questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Renu ji and Nirmal ji. That this is very, very important and very, very knowledge that everybody should be knowing. Actually, your dedication to the community service and actually providing this knowledge to all of us, we are really, really thankful to have you guys here today. I will not take too much time because I know